my name is Maxine Quijano.
My name is Sajarato Ariaman.
Hi, my name is Justin J. Regalado.
Hello, I am Nurhadi Sulampid Puno.
Hi, my name is Hanami M. Recalde.
Hello everyone, I am Najer Empire.
Good day everyone, my name is Clifford Salabo.
From AB Pol Sci 1C.
From the Department of Political Science.
An AB Political Science 1C student.
From the Department of Political Science.
The Department of Political Science.
And I'm from AB Pulsai 1C.
From Group 7.
Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Reolonda, or Dr. Jose Rizal for short. He was born on June 19, 1861 in Calamba, Philippines, and died on December 30, 1896 in Manila. He was a patriot, physician, a polymath, and a man of letters who served as an inspiration to Filipino nationalists throughout the Philippine-Spanish colonial era. He is regarded as the country's national hero. Rizal was educated in Manila at the University of Madrid as the son of an affluent landowner. As a brilliant medical student, he quickly became committed to reforming Spanish control in his native land, albeit he never pushed for Philippine independence. Between 1882 and 1892, he spent the most of his time in Europe, where he wrote the majority of his works.
The Philippines, a century hence, was originally published progressively in the Filipino Fortnightly Review, La Solidaridad of Madrid, running through the issues from September 1889 to January 1890. The goal Jose Rizal endeavored was to develop a reformed political relationship between Spain and the Philippines. The condition of the place when it was created in regards of the Philippine situation under the Spanish colonization were inhumane, unjust, and manipulative. Rizal mentioned from his work the changes of the lives of early Filipinos had altered into. The native Filipinos' cultures faded and lost meaning. It is as if the customs and belief centers did not exist at all. Aggression occurred that led them to accept without protest submitting to slavery to the authority policies of the Spaniards. Humiliation reflected them to be ashamed of their race and existence. Efforts were made to be part of the foreign affairs. Death was labeled as salvation. From the derided teachings of experience, few had awakened the realization of misfortune and began to step up their rights. However, the tyrannical leaders viewed it false, and happened to severely punish those who have awakened. After all, death was a form of salvation. Although the awakening spirits were less, intimidation within them did not conquer. Despite the former's aim to degrade and ridicule, the flame of the awakening was burning. Unfortunately, Filipinos have mostly seized hope from the act of kindness and goodness of the former. It made them thought that equality between foreign existed. Eventually, natives grasped the events that the formers were exploiters and executors. Secluding the Philippines was not tolerable anymore from the eyes of desired independence. The objectives of the Spaniards failed as years passed. Causing ignorance to the Filipinos led them to enlightenment of national consciousness that preserved El Estrado. Maintaining poverty within the Filipinos made them work harder and decide for change. An extermination of the Filipino race made them more eager to fight their lands, their home. Early revolts, unfortunately, failed due to lack of unity. The punishment, or worse, death was implemented with these early revolts. The influence for Jose Rizal to write this, besides from portraying how massively cruel the policy and conditions of the Spaniards were, he took this as a prediction of what possibilities could happen for the next 100 years of the Philippines. He had eyewitnessed as an illustrator the events occurred during his time. He was one of the most intelligent, and despite the consequences, he chose to use it with the intention of change for the sake of his country. He envisioned independence of the country, and a man may depict it as a coincidence, but a decreed true fate was bestowed upon when our independence was was finally established in 1898.
What then had made the people realize their sad situation under Spanish rule? It's racial discrimination. Why? Filipinos became aware that they were a distinct people. For the first time, they realized the colonial policies and its condition could no longer be condoned. Filipinos accumulated their grievance against the Spaniards, which eventually led to the rise of revolution. But none of this revolution led to us winning because Filipinos at this time was not united enough. And it is also because of Filipino warriors back then was not that much compared to Spaniards. A second cause of this misery was deterioration and disappearance of Filipino indigenous culture. Now, some of our culture at this point is slowly fading or was not valued anymore. It's because we were colonized by Spaniards, and these Spaniards, they want us Filipino or the Filipino back then to adopt their culture, and this leads to rapid change of lifestyle of this Filipino, of the Filipino. Though till up to this day, the Spaniards culture is still at some point alive. Just like for example, the language that we Sambuangueños have, this was derived on the language of the Spaniards. Third cause of this miserable condition of the people was their passivity and submissiveness to the Spanish colonizers. Now, during the time of Spaniards, Filipino submitted all to the Spaniards. They become Masonurin and faithful to this Spanish, but they were forced to act like that or in that way in order to live or in order not to be killed and in order not to be punished. Rizal's essay centered on the reform and political changes needed for the Philippines to remain under Spanish rule. Nevertheless, he stressed that reform have to be initiated by the government for them to be peaceful and effective. These reforms were the following: freedom of the press in the country, representation of the Filipinos in Spanish courts, granting of Spanish citizenship to the people, filling of government positions through competitive examinations, and reform in commerce, agriculture, and education, and greater security for the individual and other reforms.
One question raised by Rizal in this essay was, could Spain prevent the progress of the Philippines? If Spain decided to do so, what could it possibly do? To answer this question, it was stated in Rizal's essay that the Spanish government made three movements which will hinder the progress of the Philippines. First, they must keep the people ignorant. Second, they must keep the people in poverty. Third, they must exterminate the Filipino race. But those three movements did not succeed. Why? Because the Spanish government failed on keeping us ignorant. We Filipinos were awakened on a national consciousness among people that made us united. With the spread of enlightenment, the Ilustrado class arose. Second, they also failed on keeping us into poverty. Keeping the people in poverty created in the Filipino the desire to change things. Exterminating the Filipino races also failed. The people had survived in spite of the wars they had engaged in and the epidemics that had plagued the society. Can the divide and impera or divide and rule policies still work to foster enmity between and among the natives? To Rizal, this would no longer be effective, causing to the case of movement in the archipelago brought about by improved means of transportation. Going back to history, Spain decided to give up their ruling in the Philippines to another colonizing country. Then Rizal raised another question. Which country then? Which country will be interested in what Spain has to give up? To Rizal, this country is no other than the United States. What Rizal has envisioned or predicted in this essay came true. The Americans entered the Philippines and wrestled from Spain the control of the Philippines. For overall analysis about results essay, from the title itself you could already find hints about what the essay is all about. The essay talked about the predictions and envisions of Rizal to the Philippines after 100 years of colonization. Yet most of those information in the essay did happen.
The Philippines a century hence, in Spanish, Filipinas dentro de 100 años, is an essay written by our national hero Dr. Jose Rizal, published in La Solidaridad. The title itself narrates the whole writings. This essay is a prediction written by Rizal. He had based each predictions to real estate of the Filipinos way back the era of Spaniard colonization. In the first part of Rizal's essay, shows the cruel miseries suffered by our fellow Filipinos in the hands of the Spaniards. In the Spanish colonial, here in the Philippines, they had their policies implemented, and one of those policies are forcing men to become part of their military people, and most of those Filipino army died leaving their household alone. This focused on reforms and political changes. One of the causes identified in this article was Spain's implementation of her military policies.
The important contribution to our Filipinos is a big thing what Rizal has done. Because Rizal want to start the revolution against the Spanish government to attain the freedom and to gain control of the country. Because of Rizal's writings, many Filipinos want to be free in their homeland, and the military policies of the Spanish government are so cruel. Many of the Filipinos not able to change their way of life, and the nationalism doesn't exist. The impact of Rizal in his essay is very helpful in our fellow Filipinos. They are motivated to get their freedom, and he awakened the heart and opened the mind of Filipinos, and because of his work, the Filipinos chose their nationalism to be free themselves from the Spanish government. And what Rizal done and what he wrote in his essay, he want to remind the Spain the circumstances there roles in government. They want the Philippines own their own law of government. The Philippines is a century hence a lot of contribution to our nationalism. Rizal describing that the suffered of the Filipino people into the Spanish government, and Rizal wrote in his essay he want to awaken the Filipino people and make their own government and control the motherland.
The relevance of the Philippines a century hence are: the people of the Philippines have remained faithful during 3 centuries, giving up their liberty and their independence, and sometimes dazzled by the hope of the paradise promised, sometimes scheduled by the friendship offered them a noble and generous like the Spanish, sometimes compelled by superiority of arms, of which ignorant and which timid spirit invested with a mysterious character, or sometimes begged. The invading foreigner took advantage of internecine feud to step in as the peacemaker in discord, and thus, after to dominate both parties and subject through authority. What result of the heart passion for his country became his primary mission, to save from the terror and tyranny of the cruel Spaniards. His allusion of the past Philippine and reading gave the spark of idea to Rizal that he is not actually prophesying. In his most precious essay, The Philippines a Century Hence, written in 1889 in his December 15, 1896 memorandum for use by his council, Rizal made the following predictions: 1. The Philippines will one day declare herself independent. 2. The Great American Republic with interests in the Pacific may one day think of acquiring possessions beyond the seas. 3. The Philippines will defend with indescribable ardor the liberty she bought at the cost of so much blood and sacrifice. 4. Japan will swallow us. 5. Once liberated, the Philippines will perhaps establish a federal republic. And 6. The Philippines will perhaps enter openly the wide road of progress and will work jointly to strengthen the mother country at home as well as abroad.